Thank you very much, and I guess thank you, David, for the introduction. But thank you, Michel and Jirgi, for putting on this conference and for the invitation to participate here today. What I'm going to be talking about in the next 15 minutes is a little bit of not just new strategies in the anti-doping, but a bit of a shift in the mindset of those in the anti-doping community. And then, of course, I'll focus a little bit more on specifically on the athlete biological passport. In traditional anti-doping, we've had substances that have been prohibited since quite a long time. And actually, in 1928, the IAAF actually started prohibiting substances. But it took approximately 40 years before there was actually any real drug testing. And you saw from FIFA in 1966 and IOC also was around that time where they started to advance and enhance the prohibited list, including now starting to test particularly for stimulants and narcotics in the early years. And then there's another 40 years, it's almost sounding biblical, of 40 years of wandering in the desert, where drug testing and anti-doping became almost synonymous. It was kind of equated that, you know, you pass the urine test, you're clean. And is this system working? I mean, we know that there were some successes, there's thousands of athletes that have been caught, there's probably some deterrence, but we also know that we're not catching the real large numbers of people that have been involved in doping. And it's actually been flaunted in our faces, and a couple of the examples, of course, we all know with Marion Jones and Lance Armstrong mentioning specifically on the hundreds of drug tests that they passed, only to later to confess to doping. So clearly there's a need for some new strategies. Before I talk about the passport, I just want to say that not only do we need new strategies, but the world has changed radically in the last 15 years. You don't have to go into some dark, dingy gymnasium and buy some substance. All you have to do is you can sit in a Starbucks with your iPad, order, check through Google and find, you know, non-detectable anabolic steroids, and it's going to be sent, shipped to your address in no time before you finished your cappuccino. So the challenges are a little bit more than they used to be 2,000 years. So sometimes I think that we're hard on ourselves, but we are making somewhat of a difference. There's a constant need for these new analytical tests as these new substances are created. There's a sophisticated entourage now. There's a lot more money in sport, and there's sports scientists, there's physicians that we know are been involved in, I don't say the word helping the athletes, but are involved with the athletes' doping. Criminal underworld. It's something that we are very well aware that the criminal underworld, the same group that may be selling cocaine and heroin, kind of realize that there's a lot of profit with a much less risk if you're just involved in anabolic steroids and erythropoietic stimulating agents. So this is something that we worry about. Quality of ADO programs, I just want to throw that in there because that's still a challenge for us. We keep hearing about numbers, cost efficiency. At the end of the day, whether you have a program and you're doing a lot of tests, and even if you have an athlete biological passport program, you still have to apply it in a strategic and clever fashion, or you're just going to get numbers. We are trying to emphasize quality over quantity, and that's something we've been really pushing. There should be no pointless tests. Every test should have a meaning behind it, including the fact that some of them may be planned as a random test. So we have to go beyond the traditional testing, and in actual fact, this is not something that's in this new code. In the present code, we have Article 2.2, which says it's not just the presence, but the use of a prohibited substance may be established by any reliable means, including witness statements, documentary evidence, or evaluations of longitudinal profiles. So all of that can lead to anti-doping rule violations. So speaking of the longitudinal profiling, it's been going on for a while, and I know some ADOs have been involved and some of the labs have been involved probably since before WADA started. But after the Torino Olympics, there was a feeling particularly by a number of international federations that there was a need to organize and to harmonize. And a group was formed with WADA's help on an ad hoc hematological expert group, which came up with the ABP operating guidelines and technical documents. The point of this is to have a robust legal and scientific framework in order to pursue anti-doping rule violations. It's not just for targeting, it wasn't just for the no-start rule, but this is something where you actually can go ahead and prosecute and sanction an athlete based simply on an abnormal longitudinal profile. And to do this, where there's often court challenges, you need a very strong framework. So we're grateful to all of those who've helped over the years to come up with this kind of a document. I know at least one person left the bar at 9 o'clock, said she's going back to the room to read the ABP guidelines and technical documents. So I'm not sure if everybody has this on the tip of the tongue, so I'll just give a couple of examples from it. One of it is, as we've heard, the blood sample shall be analyzed as soon as possible after its reception, within 48 hours of the collection. This was 36 hours, and it is 36 hours. Will change to 48 in January 1st. We have an ongoing hematological expert group that wrestles with many of these issues, and reviews every paper that's out there on these topics, and also suggests sometimes new research that's necessary to try and address these issues. So that was what we came up for at this point. So it's the 48 hours. Again, I think it was Martial who showed some of these things, so I won't dwell on it, but the idea is that if you stand up, there's pooling, vascular pooling in the lower extremities, so therefore, again, we want consistency so that if you can compare one sample to the next sample, you know that you can actually say, well, the hemoglobin is not changed. It's not just for some postural or for some other reasons. These things are all spelled out in detail in the documents. One of the other things is that we want to have a test 2 hours after such activity. Again, we wrestled with this, is 2 hours the right amount? We brought this up again last June and again a few months ago, and we're very, very well aware that we're trying to kind of combine the science with the practical elements. And we've seen that, at the end of a football match, you can't really ask an athlete to hang around 2 hours before you do this test. And it's not very practical. So if we could reduce it 1.5 hours, we would love to. At this stage, it's felt that there's too much variation, there's fluctuation, you'll have a contraction of your plasma volume, then you'll have an expansion, and then it kind of settles down. Is that for every position in every sport? No, of course not. We know that the goalkeeper in soccer is going to be different than the defender, is going to be different than the forward runs around. We get questions all the time. What if you get up to go and get a drink? Well, did you have to start the 10 minutes over? Some points you're going to have to use common sense and you're going to have to document it. We got asked by Finland, where it seems that half the population spends all their times in saunas. And where does that fit in the 2 hours? So these are the kind of things that we try and address. And when we do that, we use all of the experts that we have. Just some of the other things in the documents, you've seen some of this business of training. We ask, these are the information that you have to collect as an ADO and as a doping control officer. We're using hypoxic tents with altitude. Now this is basic information. If at some point this goes ahead and there's a case about to be opened up, clearly you're going to need to know how long was that athlete at altitude, where is he, what kind of training, and all of that's going to be discussed by the experts. So, but this is just basic information that needs to be collected. And including in the guidelines also, as you have the laboratory documentation packages, which is produced by the labs or the APMUs in the labs, and asking all sorts of information. And in the second paragraph there is pH, specific gravity, and these are all things that are now related to the new steroidal module. So this is kind of information that has to be put together before these cases kind of move ahead too far. I'm not going to show anything about the passport. You've seen all this, but I do want to say a few words about atoms. When WADA is developing the entire athlete biological passport, it's predicated on the use of atoms. It's crucial for the global efficacy of the ABP. I know a few people here saying, oh, we're part of a country that's not using it, and we're trying to start to use atoms. So all I can say is keep trying and try harder. If everybody is not using atoms, there's going to be gaps. There's going to be holes. You're going to be looking at a longitudinal profile with things missing. There's going to be results that the laboratory are going to be put in. They're going to be orphaned results that are not going to be tied to a longitudinal profile. So this is something that we need everybody to kind of get on the same page. We want sharing, we want IFs and NATOs helping each other, and also this helps with cost efficiency. The other part is that one of WADA's roles is to do the monitoring. And if we have to assure the athletes that the athletes from other countries are also being monitored. So if we have a country where we don't have any statistics, we don't see things in atoms, WADA cannot fill its mandated role to continue to monitor some of these results and monitor the athletes. Just a few words on the hepatological module. It's been up and running now for, I guess, almost 4 or 5 years. And the number of athletes sanctioned has increased. So there's a 240% increase over the previous period before there was an introduction of the blood passport. And as we say, it's used for targeting for the traditional test. It helps you plan your targeting so you can go after athletes with EPO, and there's many good examples exactly of that. But it's also a direct means to an ADRV. You don't have to ever have a positive analytical test, and you can still sanction the athlete for that. And it's been at least 3 cases that have gone to CAS, and they've all been upheld by CAS. Deterrence, I won't say too much about this, but we do believe that there is a deterrent effect. Mario Zorzoli had a very nice paper describing the changes in reticulocyte percentages as the EPO tests came in and then as the blood passport came in. We also have seen changes in performances, times to go up to Alpe work that's kind of measured in different competitions, particularly in cycling, and in athletes' testimonials. We'd love to have prevalence figures and be able to say for sure how much the true deterrence is, but unfortunately, we don't have that information yet. And we always get asked about costs. Cost efficiency, well, for sure, if you are looking at some athletes closely and there is some suspicion on some of these athletes, there may be increased testing. And that testing could be expensive, sending the DCO over to that to the athlete and getting the test. But at least that should be money that's well directed and well spent, because you're actually going after somebody who is suspected of doping. The other part of it is that if you are testing athletes and you have a process where the evaluations are being done on a regular basis with APMU experts, with other experts, you can start decreasing testing on certain groups and on certain athletes, because you now are looking at some of those prevalence figures. And again, Martial showed some very interesting areas. Well, hey, this is where some of this doping is happening. This is where we believe the blood manipulation. So the IAAF or others will say this is where we're going to spend our money. That to me makes perfect sense. You've all heard that the steroidal module is going to start being operational on the 1st of January. It's basically standardizing analysis of the steroid profiles, which again has actually occurred, but more of kind of a, I won't say haphazard way, but not being done the same way by different laboratories. And again, we've heard this about moving from the population references, the Professor Donike's TE ratio 4:1 to more personalized values. And I'll just go very quickly because you've seen this, but this is the idea that certain athletes will have a TE ratio of greater than 4, and that may be their natural, or they've been doping for a long time consistently. But this is something that we see, and each one of these tests theoretically could be going for IRMS confirmation, which is very expensive. The other part of it is that there are some athletes, usually Asian populations, who have a genetic polymorphism such that their TE ratio is very naturally low. And if you look at on the right, the blue line is down at 0.12, 0.15. And then this is actually an athlete who was given oral testosterone. This was an experiment, and it had a 10-fold increase in his TE ratio, but the TE ratio, even with a 10-fold increase, stayed way under the radar. So this is an athlete who would have gotten away with cheating, but would be very easily flagged in our new, the steroidal module of the ABP. So as I'm kind of wrapping up here, there are future models. We haven't talked about the endocrine module, but there's an endocrine working group looking at things in blood matrix with growth hormone access. There's proteomics. You've seen Yanis's excellent presentation on the genomics. And all of this at some point is all going to be one big part of the passport. We're calling them different modules because we have different experts working on them at some point. But no more than when a patient has a file and he has biochemistry and hematology results and endocrinology results, at some point it becomes the overall picture of the athlete. And then people have talked about a forensic model. And I'd say that the ABP is part of a forensic module. It includes, the definition of the passport includes a longitudinal profile and all other information. And that information is gathered from an intelligent testing plan. It's continually modified by the ADO and the APMUs and the other experts. And initially it's an anonymous process, but as one starts to look, then everything else starts to be checked. Competition schedules, training schedules, whereabouts, knowing about microdosing and what particular group this athlete may be, all plays into the picture. And as David mentioned, that information from investigations is becoming a bigger role. We have an example of a case where this was an athlete who was under an ABP athlete who was being checked by USADA, and while he was being closely watched by USADA, they got a phone call from the customs and said that we have a report of a package from a clandestine origin that was being sent to this particular athlete, care of the USOC training center in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So I don't know how that fits into our statistics. Was that a passport positive? Was that it certainly wasn't an analytical positive, but nevertheless, this is yet one of those cases where, thanks to some of the cooperation and agreements that WADA have put together with customs organizations, with Interpol, that we are getting information that kind of can help, root out where the real problems are. So, conclusion, we need to continue to explore and develop all sorts of innovative strategies to enhance the rights of athletes to doping-free sport. This is what our goal is. We need to invest in research. That's going to be new research, whether it's on genomics, but also in traditional testing. Sometimes people say, oh, the ABP is going to take care of everything. We won't need to do the traditional testing, we'll just get indirect results. On the contrary, they complement each other. And the more money can be invested in traditional analytical testing, the better the ABP is. It's nothing easier than you have a positive test and you don't have to go through all the experts and go into the courts. And we'd just like to thank FIFA and all of the other stakeholders, because we learn from everything that you guys are doing, from the initiatives, and it's something, this kind of a cooperation, that we need to kind of continue as much as possible, and this is what our goal is. So we hope we're always ready and open for any comments, for any suggestions, and we have our ears wide open. That's it. Thank you very much.